I'm Bob Gorzynski. I teach music and media management and creativity and some strategy at third year level.
I'm here to celebrate really these three books, and there are three of them, and I'm going to talk mostly about the new one. And I'm really going to do two things. One is I'm going to talk a little about why bother with strategic thinking? Why bother even to try and see the big picture? A little bit about that. And I'm going to tell a few stories about my personal journey as a writer, because I think it's quite interesting. And it's a bit bizarre at times, and some of the stories are a bit strange, but they are actually true. So what I'm going to start off with is something I usually say at induction. And I think it's interesting that, and I'd say this more, and actually as the inductions go on, I've been here 7 years, I think now, I say this more, we live in a world where we have phenomenal opportunities. And I think about what you guys, the guys here as students in the university, what you guys can actually look forward to in life and what the potential and possibility for you is. And it is mind-boggling, even for people of my generation. And that includes working throughout the world in any number of different things. And it also includes actually the ability to follow your heart, to do what you want to do, rather than to be channeled into something because that's what's expected of you. And that is mind-boggling. And this is probably the luckiest generation ever. On the other hand, there is a shadow side, and that's really what these books are about. And the shadow side is about challenge, and the challenges that will face you as you live your life. And those challenges are extremely significant, and we haven't even begun to see the real ramifications of those. And that includes environmental degradation, all kinds of other things which will make financial crisis that we're now facing look pretty small scale. You guys will actually pick up the tab for some of the things that my generation have failed to actually address. So that, in a way, is a shadow side. But we're not going to talk about that today because this is a book launch, and it's going to be positive. So we're going to put that on one side. It is a motivation for me to write these books. And this one, actually, the latest one, The Power of Strategic Thinking, is about what we can do when we can see the bigger picture and how that can affect us and the opportunities and the possibilities that arise if we can start to think more broadly.
The first one was kind of the primer, and that talks about actually how do we think strategically, how can we adopt a bigger picture. The second one applied that to leadership, which I tend to define as being sort of the ability to think strategically plus the capacity to act. And the third one really is about the power itself of strategic thinking. In other words, the possibility and the opportunities that come if we can only just open our minds up a little bit and get a bigger picture.
But I wanted to start off with a story because stories are good. And I promised myself actually when I started writing to do two things. One was that I would dwell on the positive rather than the negative, because there are lots of other people shouting warning signs in the world, and they do it very well. And I decided that what I would do is offer opportunities and solutions, rather than necessarily just talk about what we need to address. And secondly, I decided I wouldn't write as polemic, but I'd write stories, which is what I do. So really the books are full of stories which illustrate some of the points I'm trying to make. But the question is, why? Why do all this stuff? Why write about how to see the bigger picture? Why is it so important?
It's born of my desire actually to do something to make the world a better place, actually resolve some of the issues that we have.
Gellert was the faithful hound of Prince Llewellyn, who lived, I think, 12th, 13th century, one of the famous Welsh princes, because he almost united Wales. And he had a faithful hound. That faithful hound did everything with him, and they used to go hunting. But one day, when they were going out hunting, unfortunately, Gellert was missing. And so the prince went hunting on his own, came back, and there was Gellert, waiting for him. Only he had blood all around his mouth. And the prince had a thought. He thought to himself, that's not right. And then he was alarmed because he looked for his son, who he left in his cot, and the cot was empty. So he took his sword and he slew the dog. And as the dog was dying, he let out a howl, and in answer to the howl, there was a cry from the little boy who was underneath the bed. And when the prince looked underneath the bed, he found a huge wolf next to the child, which had been slain by the dog. And the child was fine. And That's kind of a story about not being able to see the bigger picture, not being able to see the whole and taking actions when we can't actually see the real ramifications of what we do. It's a business book, but it's only a business book really in title because it's aimed at everyone. And yes, there are lots of case studies on business in it, and some of the ones which you won't be surprised about. There's Branson, and there's Steve Jobs and Apple and National Trust. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, big names like that. But actually there's a lot of stories about individuals, there's a lot in the charitable sector, not-for-profit, there's a lot at the individual level, because we can talk about these big organisations, but if we really want to make a difference, we're going to have to work at the individual level. That's where the changes are really going to happen.